So we are now beginning sampling and statistics, which is module 10, and we are beginning lesson 10.1 today. I'm going to talk about biased and unbiased samples. And as you can see, our learning target, I can identify biased and unbiased sampling methods and understand that inferences made are only valid if the sampling method is unbiased. There are a lot of vocabulary words in this lesson, as you can see. So we're going to discuss and talk about what are biased samples, what are unbiased samples, what are convenience samples. We're going to talk about the simple random sample, stratified random sample, systematic random sample, etc. So as you can see, we are going to be discussing all these different vocabulary words. So let's start with statistics. As you can see over here, what exactly is statistics when we are talking about that. And statistics is nothing but the practice of collecting and analyzing data. So we are going to collect data, we are going to analyze data, and that's what statistics is. Okay. Population is the group being studied. Okay. So statistics is normally used to collect information about a population, which is the group that is being studied. All right. Now, um, what is a sample? Instead of like the entire population, sometimes we take a small percent or the small amount of the population, which is the sample that we actually study. And a sample is a part of a population and it should be representative of the population. So, a statistic refers to a single measure of some attribute of the sample, and a statistic that is used is the percent of a sample that shares the same attribute or response. Okay, so now data from the sample are often collected in the form of a survey. And whenever we are surveying somebody, we are asking certain questions, and so data is normally collected based on that survey, and which is nothing but a set of questions, or it is a question designed to gain information about the population as a whole. Okay, so I'm going to show you different types of questions or certain topics, and let's see whether we can identify that is it going to be a sample or is it going to be representing the population. So here are some questions that we have. So if it's asking how many hours a night do you study? Okay, so if it's talking about 25 randomly selected seventh graders, y'all, the population is comprised, seventh grade is a part of that entire population, so this is definitely going to be a sample. If it's talking of all of the students in the middle school, then it is representing the population. Okay, let's look at the next one. um, So, it's talking about what is the town's favorite flavor of ice cream. So, when it's talking about the favorite flavor of ice cream, if it's talking about all the residents of the town, that becomes population. But when it's talking at customers at a local ice cream store, that is just a sample of the entire population. All right, let's look at the next one. Who should be the mayor of our city? So 350 residents outside of City Hall. So this is again representing only part of the population, not the entire population. So that is why this one, residents outside of City Hall, 350 residents outside of City Hall, would be a sample. But if it talks about all of the residents of the city, that would be the population. Okay, so that would be representing the population. Okay, so now um, let's quickly discuss a valid sampling method. Okay, so what is a valid sampling method? So let me just take you to the next. Okay, so just look at that. When choosing a sample from a population, it is important to use a valid sample method. And a valid sample method is one that is representative of the population. Okay, it is selected at random where each member has an equal chance of being selected, and it is large enough to provide accurate data. So that is what signifies a valid sampling method. Okay, so let me give you some examples of the simple or stratified or systematic random sample. So let's look at some examples of that. These are more vocabulary words, but let's quickly talk about the different sampling methods. Okay, so the first one, you have the simple random sample. So in this one, each item or person in the population is as likely to be chosen as any other. So there is a likelihood of anyone in that population being chosen. For example, 25 student names are written on slips of paper and placed in a basket. One name is randomly selected. So this is there's a full probability that any person in that population can be selected. So this is a simple random sample. Okay, then stratified random sample. In this, the population is divided into groups with similar traits that do not overlap, and a simple random sample is then selected from each group. Okay, so for example, students of a school are divided into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. A random sample of 25 students from each grade is chosen, so it's stratified into the grade levels, and then 25 students are then selected from each grade level. So that's the difference between simple random and stratified random. Okay, um, then let's look at the last one, which is a systematic random sample. Okay, this is systematic random sample. So if I look at this one, in the systematic random sample, the sample is selected from the population according to a specific item or time interval. So, for example, every 10th customer at a store is given a survey, or a customer is chosen to complete a survey every half hour. So, that is a systematic way of collecting random samples, again, based on time, like for example, like they said, every half an hour, or it is like pretty random according to specific item, that every 10th customer, every 20th customer, every 5th customer, every 10th child who walks into the school is asked what their favorite pizza topping is. So that is an example of systematic random sample. Okay, so let's talk about how to identify valid sampling methods. So let's look at this one. All right. So the Astronomy Association wants to take a survey to decide on the theme for the annual celebration. They are presented with three valid sampling descriptions as options to take the survey. So for each sampling description, we are going to select the valid sampling method that best represents it. Okay, so a computer randomly chooses 500 people from a list of members. Okay, so is this simple random sampling? Is it your stratified random sampling, or is it your systematic random sampling? So we can see that in this case, what's going on, here, like each item or person in the population is as likely to be chosen, because it is talking about randomly chooses 500 people from a list of members. So therefore, this one is definitely going to be a simple random sample. All right, simple random sample. Let's look at the next question about this one. And it's saying members are separated by state and 10 people are randomly chosen from each state. So now it is, you are having, is it like stratified? Is it simple? Or is this going to be systematic? So because the population is divided into groups with similar traits that do not overlap, then based on this, look at the groups. Members of a state and 10 people are randomly selected. So they are separated by state. And this is what is dividing them into groups. And then from there, then a simple random sample is being selected in this case. So therefore, the second one is definitely a stratified random sample. Okay, then let's look at the last example in this, and that is saying from a list of each member in the association, every 200 is surveyed. Okay, so now over here, what are we looking at? There's a list, and every 200 person is surveyed over here. So the sample is selected from the population according to a specific item in this case. All right. So the what is the specific item? It's from a list of each member in the association. So that makes it a specific item, and then every 200 is surveyed. So this one is going to be a systematic random sample. That's systematic random sample. All right, so just giving you an example of the three different types. Let's just do a quick another example. Let's look at this one. For each sampling description, identify the valid sampling method that best describes it. So let's look at the first one. To determine which passengers' carry-on bags are to be inspected, every eighth person to check in will have his or her bag inspected. So as you can see, this is definitely systematic random sample because it is systematic, it is random, and they're talking about that every eighth person who's checking in will have their bag inspected. So it is systematic random sample. The next one, to test the accuracy of a biometric scanner, a scientist uses a computer to generate a sample of 20 subjects from a population. So this one, this is definitely a simple random sample. Okay, this is a simple random sample because it's generated by the computer to test the accuracy of a biometric scanner. Let's look at the last one over here for another example. The principal of a high school wants to use a survey to decide on the theme for their winter formal dance. Okay, she separates the students by grade. So these are separated now by different groups, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and then takes a sample of 50 students from each grade. So because of the grouping and being separated like that into groups, this is definitely going to be a stratified random sample. So these are examples of the different types of samples uh, that we have. Okay. Now, let's talk about what a biased versus an unbiased sample is. Okay. So let's look at this. An unbiased sample is obtained using a valid sampling method that is random and it is representative of the entire population or of the population. Okay. When a sample is not representative of the population, it is biased sample. And just like when we say we are biased towards something, that means we are favoring something. So this is the same way that this principle works. And a bias sample usually favors one or more parts of the population over another. And so let me show you the table below that is showing two types of biased samples. And you have a convenience sample and a voluntary response sample, and the reasons why these are biased. Okay, so let's look at the different bias samples, convenience and the voluntary response sample. So here, I'm going to give you an example of each also. So let's look at the first one. What is a convenience sample? A convenience sample is one with in this sample where members of the population are easily accessed. Okay, and for example, you give a survey to the students that eat lunch with you to find out information about middle school students. But it's not like representative of the entire middle school. You're just looking at those students who are eating lunch with you because it is convenient for you. So that's why it is a convenience sample. All right. And so therefore, this sample is not randomly chosen and not representative of the population as a whole. And that is why it is biased. Okay. Now let's look at the other one, which is your voluntary response sample. And this sample involves only those who want to or can participate in the sampling. And for example, a school principal sends out a survey on a social networking site asking middle school students to vote for their favorite restaurant. Okay, so because let's see why it is unbiased. The sample involves only those who choose to participate. So, because of this reason, normally people who choose to participate have very strong opinions about something. Either they really like it or they really dislike it. So, therefore, it kind of becomes biased, and the response will likely favor opinions that come only from people who feel very strongly about that topic. Okay, so let's look at an example. Suppose you want to determine the favorite pizza shop of middle school students in your city. Select all the samples that are biased. So let's look at these five different things and see which, four of these, and then see which of these is going to be biased. Okay, all of the middle school students that rode bicycles to school are surveyed. Now, that is kind of a bias. Only those who are riding bicycles to school is not representative of the entire population. So, this one is a biased survey. A social media poll is sent to all middle school students. Okay, so since it's talking about middle school students and then you are sending only to the middle school students in your city, uh, that is a biased sample. Okay, because then the winner is chosen from the participants out of those middle school students. Then look at the next one. Every ninth student that walks through the cafeteria door is surveyed. That is unbiased. Okay, because it's not representative of a certain population. It is there's a random chance of the who the ninth student is, whoever it is representative of the population. So this is an unbiased sample. Every person in the culinary section of the bookstore on a Monday evening is surveyed. Now obviously if they are in that section, they like that section. That is why they are in that part of the bookstore, right? So then that would definitely be a very biased survey in this case. All right, so if you're in the culinary section of the bookstore, that means you like that. So let's identify biased sampling methods. Okay, let's identify biased sampling methods. So let's look at this. Identify the type of bias sample for each situation. So let's look at the first one. To gather information about the favorite animal of middle school students, a student surveys everyone in his seventh grade language arts class. Okay. Now, because this person is serving everyone in his class, What does it show? That he's looking at what is convenient for him. So therefore, this one is definitely, it is a convenience sample. It's a convenience sample because sample, you know, is everyone that is available is in one class only, just talking about everyone in his class. So that's what's convenient to him. So it's a convenience sample. All right. Let's look at the next one. Um, a news organization posts a survey on its website that asks its readers to vote on a current topic. Okay, because only those people that choose to respond will, the sample is a voluntary response sample, because only those people who choose to respond will respond to this one. Okay, all right. So now let's go ahead and look at a few more examples so that you understand the type of bias that is being used for each situation. All right. So you survey a sample of 10 households on your street to determine how often households in the state cut their grass. Now, again, you are looking at only households who are on your street because it is convenient for you, all right, to collect that. So, therefore, this is a convenience sample. All right. The manager of a retail store mails out a survey to 500 potential customers. She uses the results of the surveys that are mailed back to determine which items to keep in stock for the spring season. So, again, this one, it is definitely a voluntary response sample because those people who want to respond are going to volunteer to respond to this. So this is a voluntary response sample. Now, let's look at a few more vocabulary words. And this entire lesson is basically a lot about vocabulary. Let's talk about what is a valid inference. Okay. So if you have used a valid sampling method and obtained an unbiased sample, that is representative of the population, you can use the results to make inferences or predictions. So, what is an inference? It's a prediction about the population. And this is called a valid inference. An invalid inference is an inference that is based on a biased sample. So, an invalid inference makes a conclusion not supported by the results of the sample because it is biased. All right. So, let's look at the table which describes inferences by each sampling method, sample, and conclusion. Okay. So these are the different sampling methods. We have a valid inference and we have an invalid inference. So let's look at the sampling method. The sampling method in the valid inference, it uses a valid sampling method, and this may not use a valid sampling method. So that's different, valid and invalid. Okay. The sample is drawn from an unbiased population or unbiased representative sample. Okay, and this one is drawn from a biased or unrepresentative sample. That's why it's an invalid reference inference. Conclusion, it makes a conclusion. The valid inference makes a conclusion that is supported by the data that is collected, and the invalid inference makes a conclusion that is not supported by the data because it is highly biased. So let's look at an example, talk about what's a valid inference and an invalid one. So, on a social networking app, a burrito company asked all of its followers to vote on their favorite style of food. The choices were Italian, Mexican, and Indian. The results are shown in the table. The company infers that the most popular style of cuisine is Mexican. So let's look at this one. All right. So now let's identify the type of sampling method used and then determine whether the inference is valid. Okay. So look at the first one. So what is the sampling method that is being used over here? So this is a voluntary response sample, and so therefore it is biased. Okay, this is a voluntary response sample which is biased. And then because it's a burrito company is asking all of its followers to vote on their favorite style of food, so this is going to be biased. Choices were the three that were given, which are these. And the company is inferring that the most popular style of cuisine is Mexican. So this is a voluntary response sample, and determine whether the inference is valid. Because the company uses a biased sampling method, they cannot make valid inferences based on the sample. The inference made by the company is therefore not a valid inference because it is biased once again. Okay. Now, um, let's do another quick example. All right, let's look at this. The customers in a music store one morning are surveyed to determine their favorite activity in their free time. The results are shown in the graph. The store manager concludes that most Americans either play music or listen to music in their free time. And so identify the type of sample method used and then determine whether the inference is valid. So if I look at this, uh, because they are collecting here, let's see. One more is the customers in the music store itself are surveyed. So that tells you that they are looking at convenience. So this is a convenience sample. And so therefore, this is biased because it's a convenience sample. It is a biased sample. And that is why this is not going to be a valid inference. So conclusion is not valid. Okay. So let's identify valid inferences. Okay, so um, the manager of a shoe store wants to determine its customer's favorite shoe color. Okay, here we go. And every third customer is surveyed. The results are shown in the table. The store manager infers that their customer's most preferred shoe color is red. So as you can see, red, blue, white, black, multicolored, you have those percentages written over there. And so, let's talk about what is the sampling method used. We're going to identify the type of sampling method used. What's happening over here? Every third customer is being surveyed. So therefore, this is a systematic random sample and it is not biased. Okay, every third customer is being selected. So it's a systematic random sample. And is it a valid inference? Because the store is using an unbiased sampling method, they can make inferences based on the sample. And the inference made by the store manager is a valid inference because it is representative of the population, considering that it is an unbiased uh, sample that is being collected. Okay. Um, could the store manager use the survey results to infer that the favorite shoe color of the population of United States is red? So could he talk about the entire United States based on that? And we're going to justify a response. Um, when we look at that, we cannot talk about the entire United States. Yes, we can talk about the population that is residing there, but it would not be valid to infer that red is the favorite shoe color because the store only surveyed a random sample of their customers. They can only make inferences about the population of their customers. They cannot talk about the entire country like that. Okay, so let's do one last question. And this is to identify the sampling method which is being used here. So 20 customers in a grocery store are randomly selected and surveyed about their juice preference. The results are shown in the table. After reviewing the data, the store manager decided that about half of the store's juice stock should be orange juice. So let's look at this one. What is the sampling method used? So this is definitely a simple random sample, um, and it is valid. Okay, the inference is valid because they are randomly selecting this. Okay, 20 customers are randomly selected, so therefore this is a unbiased sample. And is the inference valid? Yes, because it is unbiased, it is definitely going to be a valid inference. Okay, so once again, this entire unit is about we're talking about surveys that are collected from a population, whether it is a sample, whether it is a population, what is it representing, and then definitely the different types of methods. Please remember, once again, simple random sample, stratified random sample, and systematic random sample. Each person or item in the population is as likely to be chosen as any other in a simple random sample. All right. In a stratified random sample, population is divided into groups. All right. That do not overlap, and a simple random sample is then selected from each group in this case. All right, and then the systematic random sample, that is the last type, it is selected from the population according to a specific item or a time interval. All right, so this is basically what lesson 10.1 is about, and then we will continue to learn more about sampling and statistics in the ongoing lessons. Have a fabulous day.